Good afternoon, everyone. Today we're here to present our project on gender differences on body image. And there were a few questions that led us to begin this study. Some along the lines were, how often do we compare our bodies when we look in commercials to what we are seeing on the screen? Or how often do we set goals for ourselves to go on a diet? Or how often is our New Year's resolution to lose weight? And looking in society, we see that there is an increase in the need to be athletic, or the need to become thinner and become, just like so-and-so. And looking at that and seeing the increase in body comparison, we decided to replicate a study done by Rozin and Fallon that was done to see the dissatisfaction in body image between genders, so how male and female saw their bodies. The interest was also to find if there was a shift in the initial findings from Rozin and Fallon with what we are seeing in society today. So that's 3 decades after the Rozin and Fallon study was done. We implemented additional variables just to see how they would correlate with the gender perception on body image. As Rozin and Fallon only did the body image component, they didn't add any additional variables. So the question came up, what is the relationship between attachment, cognitive fusion, resilience to body image perception? Those were our introduced variables. And basically, attachment was added because we wanted to see if our relationships with our peers, with our family members, or with our partners had any influence or any correlation with how we viewed our bodies. An attachment is essentially a source of esteem that, an attachment that is built through infancy with our caregivers, and then later in life it switches to our peers. So when we go to school, and then our friends and our partners, romantic partners. Cognitive fusion we felt was an important aspect as well, because cognitive fusion entails when a person has the inability to think of thoughts as simply as just passing thoughts, but they look at thoughts as something concrete and as a fact. So if I see, if something comes through my mind that I need to lose weight, that becomes a fact in my mind rather than just a thought that's passing through, and I start to act upon those thoughts. So we thought, how would that influence how we view our bodies? If our cognitive fusion, or the ability to see thoughts as simply just thoughts, is that an effect or a correlation with how we see our bodies? And then resilience is essentially a coping factor. So, and the ability to live positively and efficiently while facing troubles. So seeing how we deal with difficult situations, with how would that impact or influence our body image? This here is the component that we replicated from Rozin and Fallon. This is the body picture inventory, and basically the average females answered that their bodies were close to a 3.62 on the scale, and that their ideal, they felt, would be a 2.74, and what they thought men were interested or found attractive was a 2.50, which is exponentially or significantly farther than what their current body image is. This gap between what currently is and what they think should be is large, and we find that that has a lot to do with the external influences. When asked to rate an ideal body from a male's perspective, males answered that they would prefer a 3.25, which is very close to what a woman currently rated themselves to be as right now. So we see that the expectation that women find to be thinner is not necessarily what men are looking for or what men rate as the ideal for them. In the average of male responses, we find that it is very consistent. Males thought themselves to be at a 3.82, and their ideal would be at 3.59, just a little bit smaller. And they thought that women would prefer a 3.47, which is a little bit smaller, but not too far from what they currently are right now. And when asked, females rated the attractive male body as a 3.35, which is relatively close to what men are right now. So men show and display a very consistent mindset with their body image perception.
Aren't the fellas lucky? Well, that component is the replication of Rozin and Fallon. What we did to differentiate our study is we implemented 4 additional scales. So we implemented the social attitudes and appearance scale, the attachment scale, the cognitive fusion scale, and the resilience scale. And we found 3 pretty significant correlations. The first is between the social attitudes and appearance scale and cognitive fusion. The social attitude scale was aiming to investigate how much pressure individuals feel to be thin and athletic, and where these pressures are coming from peers, from the media, and from family. And people who scored higher on this scale felt a greater pressure to be thin, athletic, or to lose weight. And this correlated with cognitive fusion. The higher the score in the cognitive fusion scale means the more rigid thinking and the more set thinking. So we can assume that more set, more concrete sort of thoughts are related to a greater pressure to be thin or to lose weight. So when a passing thought comes, oh, wow, that person's so thin, I should lose a few pounds. It's not just a passing thought, it's true, wow, let's look at some weight loss plans. That's sort of what it would be attributed to. The second correlation we found is between the social attitudes and appearance scale and attachment. Now this is interesting because it shows that the higher the pressure someone feels to be thin and athletic kind of relates to attachment, the more insecure attachment the person displayed. So more avoidant and anxious behavior in their relationships were attributed to greater pressures to be thin. And the last correlation that we found was between attachment and cognitive fusion, that the higher someone rated in the attachment scale or experiencing more avoidant and anxious sort of behaviors in their relationships also attributed to more cognitive rigidity. So we can relate that more anxious, more avoidant thoughts are related to more anxious, more avoidant types of behaviors in relationships. And the interesting thing is that all 3 scales were somewhat related. So more rigidity in thinking, based on our findings, is related to higher pressures to be thin and more insecure attachment in their relationships. Now, this has some implications, and based on our study, one significant implication is what we, I think, generally know to be true, that women do show more dissatisfaction in their bodies. There is a greater gap between women's body current and their ideal and what men find themselves to be. Now, there seems to be a great deal of pressure from the media. Our findings reported that women are reporting that they are feeling a greater pressure from the media to lose weight and to be thin. And this seems to be the embedding perception in both men and women that they are experiencing this pressure, but more so for women. Also, this a significant implication based on the social attitude scale is that there seems to be a great deal of pressure coming from family and peers to lose weight and to be thin and athletic. This raises a question. We, in our family groups, in our peer relationships, are we being supporters or are we being critics? Are we playing to the influence the media has, or are we setting ourselves aside and apart and providing comfort and support rather than criticism? These findings have a few applications, and the first is to promote awareness of the factors that are influencing our body perception and how we can overcome them. If our thinking is very rigid and stiff, how can we be more aware of what we're thinking, and if every thought that comes to our mind, is it really true or is it just a passing thought? That can alleviate a lot of pressure that we place on ourselves in regards to our bodies. The second is to promote change, as I said earlier, in our friend, family groups, support groups, to promote more positive body image instead of a more critical tendency. Especially us women, I think we tend to gather around in negative self-talk more than positive talk. How can we change that? By becoming more aware. And lastly, to promote a change in our thinking and to really take a stand and say, what role is the media playing in how I view my body, and is that okay? Is it okay to allow supermodels to dictate my beauty? This can lead to further studies on how dissatisfaction leads to eating disorder behaviors and tendencies, which is very prevalent in our culture today. Further studies can be done with this study. There is so many directions we can take this into, and I would like to open for any questions. I know we said a lot. Yes.
Maybe I missed it. How far off was this from the original study? I mean, I know it replicated pretty much the same thing, but I was trying to see, yeah, which was the original? See what the current is.
Okay. So basically, what our results showed was that for females especially, it was a 3.62 for the current. For the Rozin and Fallon, it was just a few decimals below. So it didn't change very significantly,
So it was about the same.
pretty much.
And then you added additional factors.
Correct.
What was the number of your sample?
We had 51 participants, 34 were female and 17 were male, which is very representative of our campus. Yes?
Was there a difference in ethnicity?
Because our sample size was very small, there wasn't a big variance in ethnicity. So right now we are doing a second run of data and so far we have a very large sample. So hopefully that will be able to be answered in this part.
Were your results to what you expected, or were they
What was your
different?
expectation?
Want to answer that one?
We did have, in our hypothesis, we anticipated that there would be some correlation between attachment and body image and attachment and cognitive fusion. We were expecting there to be a stronger relationship between resilience and body image. We had predicted that a more positive self-image would be more related to a more resilient person. That's not what we found. Maybe it's because of the small sample size. So in this second run of data, we'll look into how resilience is affected or a factor. But that's what our hypothesis was. We did expect there to be a relationship between body image and attachment and cognitive fusion.
And we did expect that women would show more proneness to, the pressures that are applied by society, by the media, and family.
And in your sample, was it undergraduate college students, or did you include graduate students, or?
It was undergraduate, mostly freshmen. We did an introductory course exploring the Bible, so it was upper or lower level classes.
You mentioned the family and peer pressure. Did you break that down anymore? How much of a influence the peers had and what type of influence they did versus what the family did? Was it more overt, or was it very covert kind of pressure that they would put on, or did you even get to that? Because I know it's kind of a general finding, but.
The scale that we used within that subscale of family and peer, it basically asks if you're encouraged to always lose weight or if you are appraised by your weight. So it doesn't hone in too much into that. That is already the extent that it goes down to with that scale.
So they say research begets more research. Does it lead you to have other questions and you think, okay, let's do, not just as a follow-up, but then different direction? Like he's suggesting that you can
Right.
almost take this in lots of different paths.
Definitely.
You see it just as you
I think one of the very interesting directions that this can be taken into is, like Gabby mentioned towards the end, how much or to what extent does that dissatisfaction lead to maladaptive, behavior to lead to eating disorders and anorexia and bulimia and binge eating, which we see a lot of right now, and it's getting to younger kids all the time. So it'd be very interesting to take it in that direction.
And you can even do some comparisons with the freshman group and with upperclassmen group, graduate group, and even staff members.
Right. Right now with our data set, the second collection that we are doing, we opened it not just to college students, but to, the general public. So we're expecting to be able to analyze that, that concept of, is it just with this particular age group, or is it, extensive throughout?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was late, I missed part of it, I'm really.
It's okay.
Did you indicate, like, if, like, child maltreatment or child abuse had any influence in, because of my class, if that has any influence in terms of, eating disorders, that triggering that kind of rigid thinking or lack of acceptance in the family?
We didn't go to that extent, but when we found the relationship, particularly with attachment, that is a question that raises why such high scores in attachment, why this relationship between experiencing this pressure to be thin and the maladaptive relationship and the rigidity in the thinking. That's definitely a great question that we really would love to investigate. And answering your previous question, actually, the media subcategory in the social attitude scale related a great deal with the current body. So family seems to be playing a really significant role in the pressures of their current body weight. So we can deduce shaming, constantly bringing up losing weight, joining the gym, particularly from family. And peers, they related a little more towards the attachment. So more insecure attachment related to the peer pressure influence in the social attitude scale, which we didn't think to mention in the initial, but it was an interesting factor also.
Mine's not so much a comment, but I do want to just brag on this group. This paper has already been accepted for presentation at the American Psychological Association this summer. And so your questions, I think, are going to help them tremendously, engaging your interest, and especially for that one, it will just be a poster, so they're really going to have to limit what will be on the poster, and so seeing what you find interesting is helpful.
What is your hoped target or your number for your second round? You're saying you're trying to solicit a broader.
Right now, we currently have 285 participants. We are trying to reach at least 300, so we can see if we can get a larger demographic in males. Just as it is right now, it is split largely towards females. So we're trying to reach at least 300.
How many were in the original study, though?
51.
No, the Fallon,
Oh,
It
was
was
around
about
250.
250.
yeah.
So, fantastic.
All right, we thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming.